Pharma is consistently going through a tremendous amount of change. I love change. I do. Change is scary, but for me personally, I love it. Take advantage of change. When something's changing, a lot of times when I look through the multiple reorgs that I've been through or the changes in my career, not usually when the change is rolled out, let's all realize it's not perfect. It's not everything is not, it's the big picture, it's the strategic picture, but there's still a lot of details that need worked out. And so one of the big things that I like to encourage my teams to do is be on the forefront of that instead of be the victim of it. My grandfather, who's since passed, he told me something one time that's really stuck with me, which is two things that are very hard to gain and very easy to lose are trust and respect. The other thing that I am extremely passionate about is stay curious and network. And those things go hand in hand. I think another big thing is be available. That's very easy to say, sometimes very hard to do. You're gonna make mistakes. I think you're gonna have those leadership failures. If I've messed up or if I feel like I've messed up, just showing up, being honest, having the one-to-ones, having the phone calls, having the Zoom calls, trying to avoid dramatic emails where maybe things could be misinterpreted, especially with a global team. What I love about the global team is it does bring in various perspectives. To have everyone thinking or acting or doing the same thing is pretty boring, to be honest.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of the FLIGBY in Action Summer Leadership Series. I'm Dr. Howard Fero, the Leadership Doc, and I'm excited to be with you guys once again to have a great guest and talk about something that's real important. Not just leadership, but we're going to be talking about teams and cultivating high-performance teams. Before I introduce our next guest, I do want to kind of bring us back a couple of weeks when I spoke with Scott Silver. If you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, I highly encourage you to do it. I know we've had, I think, about 1,000 or so people have seen the video, so that's awesome. And on behalf of FLIGBY and on behalf of myself and Scott, thank you for being a part of this great series. Last time when I spoke with Scott Silver, he didn't like when I used the word that he was a disruptor, but he really is. And I highly encourage you to watch and see what he's doing in the film industry. So Scott's company, Control Media, is now bringing interactive movies to the theaters across the country, across the United States, and internationally. So his company brought us first The Late Shift, which is similar to FLIGBY in a lot of ways. And I can spend a whole hour talking about that, but we're going to talk about that another time. But it's an amazing, amazing product film initiative that they're doing to really bring interactivity to the film industry. And we had a great discussion about leadership and management and how the film industry is a little unique in some ways. So today, we're going to leave the film industry and move into pharmaceuticals, which has its own issues, good and bad. And we're very honored, and I'm very honored to have Rachel Ovens with us today, who's going to talk to us about the teams that she runs. So let me give a little intro to Rachel, and then I'm going to start the conversation, and we'll learn all about what she does over at Boehringer Ingelheim. So Rachel Ovens is a global leader with extensive experience guiding teams through transformation, innovation, and growth. As global head of feasibility and planning at Boehringer Ingelheim, she leads a diverse team focused on strategic planning, operational excellence, and technology advancement. Her career has provided opportunities to work across different organizations and functions, shaping her collaborative leadership style and passion for continuous improvement. Rachel is known for bringing people together around a shared vision, challenging the status quo, and helping teams turn ideas into meaningful impact. And I've had many conversations with Rachel about her teams that she's led, that she's been a part of, and I know this is going to be a great session. So, Rachel, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Of course. Glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
So, just to get us started, I think everyone would be really interested to hear a little bit about kind of your role at Boehringer and your leadership journey and kind of your experiences along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been an amazing opportunity in the pharmaceutical industry. I think one of the unique things that I've had the opportunity to do is see. So I'm in the pharma industry. I'm actually on the clinical research side of it. So human pharma clinical trials. And so where I've been very fortunate is the ability to see that throughout the various parts of the industry. And what I mean by that is actually started off in a site seeing patients, seeing it from that perspective, and then was able to move over to a contract research organization or a CRO and see it from that perspective, and then was able to move over to an actual pharmaceutical company later. And so by doing that, it's allowed me to sort of gain that fresh perspective and also see how the other side thinks, which I think has been very helpful throughout my career. I've had various leadership roles, small, and then I have increased those throughout my time, and so continue to learn and grow as a leader myself.
That's great. It's certainly having those vast experiences helps to develop you as a leader. There's no doubt about
Absolutely.
that. And before we even get into kind of your role, can you tell us a little bit about what specifically you do at Boehringer? I know it's fascinating, leading those clinical teams.
Sure. Yeah. So what I do is, again, it's on the human pharma clinical research side. And so when we're going to look at running clinical trials, then we need to think about where are we going to place those trials and what do we need to do to make sure those trials are successful. And so that is currently what my core team does, is really look to plan those particular studies and say, okay, which countries do we need to go to and what patients do we need to try to go after. And so there's a lot of data that sits behind my role and my team. Additionally to that, there's a lot of technology with the new, with all the new AI advancements that we're seeing. There's this huge opportunity for technology advancements in my space, and so constantly trying to navigate and scan the landscape and the environment for what those opportunities may look like. For the bigger picture, it's a group of around 800 or more individuals across the globe. That actually then once my team helps to plan those clinical trials, my bigger organization helps to then execute those trials in hopes to bring new therapies to patients.
So I have my questions, kind of the background question I wanted to ask you, but you just said something that I don't want to forget about. And you talked about the AI becoming more prevalent in the industry. Yes. Looking at it from a leadership perspective, have you found any changes because of AI coming through?
Absolutely. I think just this morning, I was on multiple teleconferences with my internal team and really looking to see, I think AI can be very scary. I think there's always that, is this going to, replace my job concept? But what I really have challenged, and I'm so passionate about the technology in this space. One of the things that I really look at it is opportunities. We're constantly, looking at our resourcing, and we're under-resourced, or all of these, the time challenges that we all, I feel like, face. And so using AI to come in and help supplement that versus seeing it as almost a threat. And how can we then use it to take care or to help us with some of those mundane tasks that can take lots of manual effort, lots of manual time, to allow us to use AI to help us and replace some of those, to give us the ability to focus on more strategic things. And so just in general, huge advocate, and definitely starting to see even the quickest of wins with using it on a daily basis.
So to me, I'm so fascinated, as I'm sure all of our listeners are and our watchers are, about AI. Do you find that you're able to start incorporate it into some of your team development?
Yeah, absolutely. Even today, it's one, trying to also upskill my people in terms of what the future of AI looks like. Also, having them become very comfortable with the terminologies that exist, with how they can apply it in their daily jobs. And again, I think gaining some of that trust that comes with AI, which is difficult and I think scattered. For instance, an example today, very simple, but it was a person on my team spent a lot of time sending out manual emails on updates and everything else. And we've been able to construct a process by which now, with a few key clicks, it'll automatically create the emails for her. She still has to go in, human in the lead, 100%, and go in and check them. But it's going to probably reduce that amount of effort on that task by 80%.
Yeah, I think you said an important line there. You said human in the lead. So I know I had a conversation with a client this morning, and we were talking about how AI can be so valuable as a complement, not as a replacement. And I'm not going to go into the story now, but I told a story about a student I had who used AI, and it can be very dangerous in some ways. And
very, absolutely.
we need to understand how to use it. And I think that's where we're all kind of learning as we go along how we can. And, not to go too far off on this, but I see Anne is interested in this too. So we have, and for those of you also listening in live here, and thank you for being here, you can ask questions in LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever you're watching, and we'll put these up here. So Anne actually asked a provocative question, I think, Anne, so thank you. Is, are pharma and AI a dangerous mix?
I think it depends on what we're talking about. We're not turning drug development over to an AI agent by any means. That's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm more talking about involving it in our day-to-day. I'll give you a really good example. Right now, when my team is looking at creating a site list for our clinical trials, and we're running a large phase 3 study. And for those that aren't familiar with the pharma, that means it's the last step of the last phase of a clinical trial before it's going to go up for approval by the FDA or other regulatory bodies. And so creating that site list is an extremely manual effort when you're trying to, it's very much data backed, and the data pieces, data sources come from a tremendous amount of disparate sources. And so in order to pull those together and create truly like a data-driven tiered site list can take weeks, to be very honest. It's very manual. You're going to go and pull out information from multiple sources. So the ability to now be able to do that and have it consolidated rather quickly and allow my team to focus more on the stakeholder management that comes with the site identification and comes with bringing those sites into the clinical trials versus spending their time fighting with Excel macros. It's actually a huge time saver. And again, I just want to reiterate, human in the lead, we're going in and we're double checking that. So when I say AI and pharma, that's more what I'm talking about at this point from my perspective.
So certainly a best practice for all of us is check and verify when it comes to AI. Yes. So I just want to give you a chance to kind of share your expertise a little bit in the sense that, so Rich, I know you lead a global team, as it's in your title, and I know you were just in Vienna meeting with your full team for one of the first times we actually get them all together. That's not an easy task. So what is it like leading a team that's so spread out all over the place?
It's definitely unique, but I actually love it. I think part of what you guys will probably hear me say this multiple times throughout this conversation is perspective. I think what I love about the global team is it does bring in various perspectives, whether it be culturally, whether it be work experience, whether it be previous leaders that they've worked under. And so by doing that, it really allows us to collectively look at the experiences. And when you're trying to build a very solid, high functioning team, I think that those different perspectives are so incredibly important in terms of, to have everyone thinking or acting or doing the same thing is pretty boring, to be honest. And so it's really nice to have those different, variety of perspectives in order to sort of challenge me, to challenge each other, which I really think leads to healthy team building in the end.
Absolutely. And that's something that, whenever I work with do workshops and whatnot, one of the things we talk about a lot is that, conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. And certainly when you're working with people from all different countries and all different backgrounds, everyone's got their own perspectives on things, and it's sometimes a little difficult to juggle and figure out, who do we side with? Almost like in the FLIGBY, simulation. For those of you who've taken it, you understand very well. We have all these different characters and archetypes of characters. So, what are some best practices that you could share about how to kind of integrate? And I know, again, you have a newer team in some ways to integrate people from different cultures.
Yeah, I think part of it is for me, it's gaining the trust. And I know we'll probably dive more into that. I think a lot of it is, and trust is a big part of it. Loving that fresh perspective, I think, is one thing. And then bringing in those fresh perspectives and building that trust is really, I can't speak enough about that. I think I was actually thinking about this last night, thinking about today. And, my grandfather, who's since passed, he told me something one time that's really stuck with me, which is two things that are very hard to gain and very easy to lose are trust and respect. And so I think part of those, I really look back on that quote from him in that when thinking about building a global team, to be real with your team, be open with your team. I think be approachable. It's all these it sounds maybe like common sense, but I think it can easily get forgotten about in the day-to-day craziness that we all experience. And so for me, it's that building that trust, being approachable, being aware of what others are going through. And also as a leader, being aware of what, I know I just said that what others are going through, but that means a lot. It means, are there holidays that week that we don't, that we're not used to, or are there just certain times of the year where others are on vacation and we're not? So you have to start thinking about all of these different things and being aware of what is surrounding you, because all of that ultimately comes back and plays into your team dynamics, and also asking for feedback, so that you know where things are going well and where maybe you're falling short.
Yeah, so important. Trust and respect really are the foundation of any leadership relationship or any relationship in general. I love that what your grandfather said. I think that's so important. And it reminded me of a quote from when I wrote my book, Lead Me Out to the Ball Game, when I interviewed all these Major League Baseball managers and players. One of my favorite interviews was with Davey Johnson, who was a former New York Mets manager, Washington Nationals, Team USA. And Davey said to me, I don't care how long you've been in this game or how much success you've had in the game. Every day you have to gain their trust, and every day you have to gain their respect. And I work with my clients. I talk about that quite often, because just think about how that changes your perspective, Rachel. If you're going into work saying, not that I have to be the best thing, not that I have to do a great job, I have to earn the respect and the trust of the people around me. Think about how that changes how you interact with people and changes your day to day. And I think, that kind of fits really nicely with what your grandfather said, to earn the trust and earn the respect. So I'm going to ask you, so what are some ways that you can do that with a global team? How do you earn trust and respect from people who are different from you in a lot of ways?
Yeah. I think part of it is respecting everyone yourself. And again, really reflected on this. It doesn't matter regardless of level, regardless of position, regardless, be the role model. Let your people or those around you, even if you're not their direct manager, let them see you, show that openness, show that friendliness, know who your admins are very well, know who your security guards are very well, know who, all of that. I think, to really, again, be that role model and show that how approachable you can be, I think is one thing that I think has gone a long way in terms of building that trust. I think another big thing is be available. That's very easy to say, sometimes very hard to do. I know time is not a luxury for any of us. And so it's sometimes, me personally, I'll have 10, 12, sometimes 14 meetings a day. And so it's easy to focus on those meetings and to not focus on your people. And so taking time to reflect on that and make sure that you are available, that you are, again, going back to the being approachable, I think is another big thing, for me, that all sort of leads into that trust component.
And being approachable, and again, certainly with a global team, is certainly going to be difficult with people on different time zones and different perspectives and whatnot. I see Nancy asked a question here. She said, Rachel, your leadership is truly a differentiator. How do you navigate the change and uncertainty in a global matrix?
I get to cheat a little bit because I know Nancy, and I didn't know she was going to be here. But it's funny, Nancy, because I was thinking about you when I was preparing for this. We actually went through a session with Nancy, and I also have to reflect on the fact that we talked about change, and we talked, especially in pharma, in any industry, but pharma is consistently going through a tremendous amount of change. And I have to do a lot of self-reflection in the fact that I love change. I do. Change is scary, but for me personally, I love it. But I need to also understand and appreciate that others don't come from that, necessarily with that appreciation or love for change. And so trying to meet people where they are, I think, is a big part of it. When we talk about, even when you look at technology adoption, right, you've got the early adopters, and then it starts going from there. And so just understanding that people don't always love change, and also that you kind of have to meet people where they are. Part of the other thing for me with change, and this maybe deviates a little bit though, is helping people get in the position that is right for them. I think is a big part of just leading effective teams and also dealing with the change. I think if you can manage people to their strengths and put them in positions which are setting them up for success, that ultimately is going to build their confidence, which, especially in the beginning, which is then ultimately going to allow you to maybe then start pushing them into some different areas as the change occurs, where they may not have felt as comfortable before, But by having given them a strong foundation where they felt comfortable and were able to succeed in areas that they excel in, I think organically it helps nurture their career into those change opportunities, which for me really helps with the change concept.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're kind of leaning into helping to build confidence with people, build
Yes.
confidence with your team members. And as we know, when the more confident you are, the more motivated you're going to be. So if
Correct.
we want to have a successful and a high performing team, our people need to know what they're doing. Right. So what are some ways that you make sure that they're in the right position and make sure that they're doing what they should be doing?
Great question. You do your best, right? I think a lot of that is intuition. Again, I think going back to being available, learning your people, taking the time to get to know where they're. And sometimes we recognize strengths in people that they don't see themselves, right? And so that may be where you need to be a little bit more patient and help build that confidence. I think as I use it, I'll give a good example. On my team, we have two very different groups of people. We've multiple different groups of people, but if I had to break it down, we've got our very data oriented, they're pulling the data, they're reviewing the data, they're very behind the scenes kind of looking at that. And then there's also, we've got a large group that has to deal with stakeholder management. So it's turning that data into decision making, presenting on that data, being out in front of people and having to justify what it is we're saying, the recommendations we are making. And so if you take one of those individuals that is very data heavy and maybe hasn't done that presentation side of things, to just immediately throw them into that, even though you may think they can do it, can be extremely intimidating. And if they feel like they have failed at that, can almost set someone back in terms of their career growth. And so part of it is, how can you partner people up? And so how can you take that data person and maybe start having them join the stakeholder management person and have them partner in a way that allows this data person to get more exposure, so that ultimately maybe they start feeling confident enough to start presenting on the data themselves and eventually become an individual that is extremely good at also this stakeholder management. And so again, it's sort of that nurturing their career in a way that allows them to grow organically and not pushing them into something that is going to in turn set them back. I caveat that with sometimes you do need to push people. We as I think leaders sometimes have the ability to see it from a wider perspective and to see it a broader view. And we may see something in an individual that they themselves may not see, which I'm a huge advocate of helping to nurture that in that individual, but also just making sure that the timing is right. One of the things that I personally am a huge proponent of is that people are in different places in their careers, and people are in different places in that moment in their careers. I can think of a time when I was a single mom of 3 kids. And during that time, I didn't have the time I wasn't worried at that time about career growth. I was worried about my kids and getting a paycheck and doing my thing. I still excelled at work, but I wasn't worried about career growth at that time. And I had a leader at that time that respected and appreciated that in me. They let me just be the hard worker I was, do my job and, do an excellent job. But I didn't need to put in sort of that growth opportunities for myself. Then fast forward, as my life changed, and my situation changed, the time for me to be able to grow in my career presented itself. And I had a different leader at that time, and they were able to help sort of foster that in me as well. And so I think as leaders, to be on the lookout for that and just recognize that your people are in very different places in their careers, in their roles. They come with different manager experiences. And maybe this year they need to just stay doing what they're doing amazing. And then maybe next year is their year where, okay, they're in a different place now, and it's time to sort of maybe push them out of their comfort zone a little bit.
So such an important point. And, it goes, I know you've read Leadership in 5G and, getting to know your people and giving them what they need. It's so important to understand that. And the 4th G, giving them what they need, doesn't mean necessarily giving them what they want. It means giving them what they need. Correct. Because a lot of times our people don't necessarily know what it is they need at that moment. And it's important for us as leaders to be able to guide them and help them. And it sounds like that's what happened with the leaders that you've had in the past. So we have a question here from Jane. And Jane said, I've been a member of several multinational teams, and I've noticed that the concept of trust is interpreted differently across countries. In your view, does trust mean the same thing to everyone in a globalized world?
No, you're right. And I'm very honest. This is something that, I continue to grow and develop in as well. We had that big leadership team meeting in Vienna, and trust came up, and I was very surprised at some of the feedback, and understanding some of the, where I don't want to say fear culture, because that's not at all what I'm trying to say, but that trust does mean different things. It takes different things to gain people's trust, and also, not to go back again, but the experiences people have had in the past can also lead to how much they do or do not trust things in the present. And so I agree, it's a bit complicated when it comes to that. But I think, again, it's taking that time to sit down and meet with those individuals and understand maybe where their trust has fallen, or what can we do as leaders to then promote more trust in those individuals that may be struggling with that.
Excellent. Yeah, it's certainly something we need to pay attention to. So Alex just put a question up, said, thanks, Rachel, for your leadership. What do you look for in a team member that truly sets them apart? And what do you do to try to build into your team's culture or environment to help that emerge organically rather than forcing it? Thank you, Alex.
Yep. So, yeah, no, thank you. So I had a great mentor of mine when I very first started off as in my career, and entering sort of that leadership realm. And she always, was big on hire for personality and team dynamics, not necessarily skills. Now, I'm not saying to go out and hire somebody that has absolutely no qualifications to do a job, but that being said, it is still something that I live by to this day. I have hired people with maybe less experience, but I felt like their personalities, the team dynamics, that it would be a better fit. I also think, going back to that diverse team, maybe I find that I have a gap. Maybe my data nerd has left, and so I don't want to replace my data nerd that left with someone that is more of my stakeholder engagement person. So I need to make sure that I'm keeping those team dynamics fluid, but also flexible. Ultimately, for me, it really comes down to team dynamics, and it's something that I hate to say this, and it sounds like a cheesy answer, but it's sort of that gut feel. I'm also big on when we're doing interviews, if we have the opportunity to do just sort of informal coffee chats, and allow the team to sort of feel how that person may interact with them as well. So it's constantly trying to play that balance of making sure that you feel like you have the right team dynamics across the board, and filling those holes as they open up.
That's great. And I was going to actually go in that direction anyway, but you mentioned the coffee chat. So being that you're a virtual team, a global team in so many ways, how do you facilitate something like that? And what kind of success have you had with it?
We've done some really fun things, actually. Back, of course, COVID times, we all had to do that, but now we've had to continue on with that. And so we have one person on my team that is, she's actually out on leave right now, but she loves that. That's one of the things that she's truly passionate about, is trying to keep the team dynamics going and to keep us connecting. And so, funny enough, one of my daughters came up with the term pause and play back during COVID times. And so we've kind of readapted that to my US team and bringing that over to my global team. And we've done fun things. We've nominated one person. We've played Jeopardy. We've played music trivia. We've done, even with it at Boehringer, we've done, virtual painting classes. And so we've done some pretty fun things. You definitely have to be deliberate about it. And I'll be honest, there are moments where I look up and it's been 6 months and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we haven't spent enough time just hanging out and having fun with one another. And so can't really reiterate enough the importance and how far those little meaningful connections can go. One of the things that I've done as well, and actually just re-implementing on this larger global team, is skip level meetings. So where I have the ability to meet with individuals that report to people under me, and so that they get some face time, again, because I just think it's so important to build that trust, that they know that I'm approachable, that there's not this need to get approval to talk to me or anything like that, that I'm always here for, to bounce ideas off of, or just sit and hang out and talk.
That's great. So we're talking a lot about the global team and the virtual. You were with them all in Vienna, or with your leadership team there.
Yes.
What was that like? Was that, strange being in a room where you don't just see them in a square on the screen, or what did you do there?
It was so much fun. I was bragging on my team because I felt like when I was there, because I felt like we were we showed up very well connected, which means a lot. We just went through a new organization change late last year, and so my team is relatively new. And so it was very fun to get together. Of course, lots of laughs, but also, again, I was really proud of us for walking in and already feeling like those connections were already there. One of the things, though, that we really encouraged while I was there is, even though my direct leadership team, we feel very connected. One of the other pieces is that there was a lot of other leadership teams there. And so one of the big challenges, not only and it was a theme of the meeting in general, was to connect more. But one of the challenges that I had for my team was go out and start making 2 new connections every quarter. But don't only you do it, go out and have your teams make those additional connections, because it just goes so far being able to walk into a room. And even though maybe we've only seen each other across the screen, I still feel like I could give you a hug because I feel like I know you well. I want them to show up to meetings like that as well.
That's awesome. I love the idea of kind of integrating the virtual with the face-to-face also. So Judith has a point here, which is, I think, a really good one. Said from her perspective, Rachel is actually talking about what we call flow promoting leadership, recognizing the personal strengths of her people, balancing their skills with the challenges, giving them immediate feedback, and accepting the feedback she receives. She demonstrates great strategic thinking. So Judith is referring to, obviously, to the concept of flow, which I know you've read a little bit about, Rachel. And those of you who are listening, it's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow, where in order to really get the most out of your people, you've got to have that high level of challenge and push them, but you can't forget to give them the skills they need. And that's something that a lot of managers sometimes do forget, that we need to make sure we're skilling and upskilling constantly to overcome the challenges and making sure they're getting the feedback for it. So any feelings on that?
No, thank you. I think it was a compliment too, so thank you. No, but just going back to that, it is easy. It is easy to sometimes, leadership for me has not always been about successes either. I think, one of the questions that thinking about coming into this was sort of what has shaped my leadership style. And it sounds almost generic and somewhat cheesy, if we can say that. But it's the tough moments. It's the leadership failures, if you want to call them that, which we'll turn that around to say growth opportunities, and being able to reflect on that and say, what could I have done better in that instance? We've all made mistakes, or what we thought were mistakes. And so it's really helpful to be able to admit that and sort of take the time to say, how could I change going forward? It's just an important part of it.
And obviously, as you're building a high performance team, is encouraging your team members to do that as well, right? So
Yes.
That's got to become the culture where they're always thinking about the things the same way you are, to continue growing and developing and upskilling their own teams. So I want to shift the focus just a little bit. So our actual title is Building High Performance Teams in an Era of Change. So change is something that obviously we are all dealing with on a daily basis almost. And I know you've dealt with some. So what are some kind of things you've gone through in that respect?
Yes. So change is a big one. And I think Nancy kind of teed me off there a little bit earlier. Change is constant. It's constant. Like I said, it's constant in pharma, but I feel like it's constant in all over the place. Technology continues to bring change. I think just to double click on appreciate that people take change very differently. And one of the big things with change is not being aware of what that change may ultimately do, or the impacts that change may ultimately have. And when we're not fully aware of all the things that are yet to come, I think that starts breaking down. It brings on worry, it brings on fear. And so for me, it comes back to that being open, being approachable, being honest when you can be. I know many times in leadership, or there may be things you can or cannot say, but as you can tell people, really focus on bringing them up to speed where you can. At every single one of my leadership meetings that we have, I try to go over any of my team meetings that I have, I try to go over, what leadership meetings I've had recently. I bring forward the information that I can. I'm honest when I say I don't know. I'm also honest when I say this is what I can tell you now, and just trying to, I think the more forthcoming that we can be with the information. And again, I keep saying deliberate, but you have to be, and you have to be intentional on updating your people. And by your people, it doesn't mean even necessarily your direct reports. This could mean people that you work with, in just a cross-functional team. It can be, and so anything that you can do to sort of, I think, promote awareness does a lot of benefit when it comes to positive change. And, in terms of helping that change be positive, I guess I should say. And so it's a roller coaster for sure when it comes to the change aspect.
Yeah, and I mean, it's what you're talking about is how to get people embrace change and kind of prepare for it as much as they can. But as we know, things don't always go as planned. So what happens? How do you deal with your team when something, maybe there's a hiccup and things aren't what you expected?
Yeah, a lot of it is honesty. If I've messed up, or if I feel like I've messed up, or just showing up, being honest, having the one-to-ones, having the phone calls, having the Zoom calls, trying to avoid dramatic emails where maybe things could be misinterpreted, especially with a global team. I think is a big thing as well. Trying to get that FaceTime, and by FaceTime, virtual FaceTime counts as well. And so I think that that's just a big part of it. And it's inevitable. And when things don't go right, it's, one of the big things that I like about change too, which is sometimes easier said than done, and something that I really try to instill in my team, is take advantage of change. When something's changing, a lot of times when I look through the multiple reorgs that I've been through, or the changes in my career, not usually when the change is rolled out, let's all realize it's not perfect. It's not, everything is not, it's the big picture, it's the strategic picture, but there's still a lot of details that need worked out. And so one of the big things that I like to encourage my teams to do is be on the forefront of that instead of be the victim of it. And it's where we can, let's input ourselves and have an opinion and try to bring solutions to where we still see the problems, versus sitting back and hoping that when it's all said and done and the dust settles, that the change is what we would hope it would have been. Because that, to me, that's missing a large opportunity of where we could have influenced the change, maybe in a way that would have been better to us.
Yeah, and I think that fits in with something that I know I talk about a lot in terms of, we need to be optimistic but realistic.
Yes.
Right? We don't want to sugarcoat things for people, because it's going to come back and bite us if we do. And that's a real quick way to lose people's trust, by telling them something that isn't 100%. So we do have a question here from David. To what extent does a multinational work environment encourage making mistakes and learning from them? It sounds good to learn from mistakes, but in practice, it's not viewed favorably.
That's tough. And I know that a lot of that is going to be culture, and I don't mean culture in terms of like country to country, I mean culture in terms of organization to organization. And so I think that that's going to come with some sort of testing the waters, figuring out what's acceptable, what's not. And I think I'm also a big data person, so I hate to say that, but that's also where I find, when mistakes are made, it's very nice to show up and show the mistake, but also just bring data with you. I think if for me, it is just so helpful to explain where things went off the rails, or, okay, maybe it didn't work, but maybe we saw a positive increase here, or maybe we didn't. But for me, simplifying it into visualizations, I just always feel like really helps when it comes to explaining where things went right or wrong. It doesn't need to be, I'm not talking complex slide decks of 20 or PowerPoints of 20 slides. That's not at all what I'm talking about. But I do feel like supporting any of those decision making, or any of that with data, does help. Now, in terms of culturally, the mistakes, I totally, I hear you on that. And that is just something that, as a leader, having that awareness that exists, knowing how to, what that may look like in day-to-day practice, being willing to ask questions about, the other cultures and how things may be perceived. Be open to learn. We always have opportunities to learn ourselves and know how we could deal with those situations better as well.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, organizational culture drives a lot of what we do. And in a large organization, like you're in a large company like Boehringer, you have your organizational culture, but then you have your team culture. And then I know you manage teams of people who manage their own teams. They've got their own culture.
Yes.
So how do you, from your position, from where you're sitting, create a culture that can be disseminated throughout your team that will kind of mirror what you're trying to achieve at every level?
Yeah, it's tough because as you mentioned, there's multiple factors that play into all of that. I think going back to be the role model is a big thing for me. The other thing that I am extremely passionate about is stay curious and network, and those things go hand in hand. And so if to your point, Howard, if I'm working with another team within Boehringer that has a different, maybe culture than I have, but I'm then connected to their leader and can understand where they're coming from, what their perspective is, get background on what their team has gone through. You don't know what I know what clinical operations has gone through, but I don't know maybe what the therapeutic areas, which is another group under medicine, has gone through. And so to take the time to learn and get that background can be so helpful when you engage in those maybe more difficult conversations or challenges that may arise. And so I think really connect is a big part of what I'm a strong believer in. I know everyone on my team, I hope, would say the same thing. And just something that I feel like can really advance not only your own career, but also can help when you're trying to build a trusted foundation underneath your team as well.
That's great. So, just to kind of bring us back to pharma a little bit, what's exciting about pharma? What's exciting about pharma when you think about it in terms of leading teams?
We bring. It was funny because it's pharma. I'm sure everyone here has thoughts about pharma, good or bad. And I remember I spoke at a conference years ago. I was a baby in my career, and at the time, it was almost like people would ask what I would do, and I would almost honestly shy away because you never knew what kind of response you were going to get. But in the end of the day, especially on the side of pharma that I'm in, we bring new therapies to patients. And it has been, I've had some very exciting experiences and exposures in my life where I've physically been able to see people get well. If I'm thinking about dermatology studies, exactly, all of these things. And so to physically be able to see patients and go through that change and watch their confidence grow and get better is very life changing for me individually, personally. And so on the clinical development side of pharma, it's bringing those new therapies where there's unmet medical needs.
No, that's great. And certainly kind of living the mission and believing in what you're doing kind of fits in with that in terms of pharma and what you're saying, but also in terms of any organization you're a part of. So
yeah,
put you on the spot a little. So how would you translate what you just said to somebody who doesn't work in pharma as they're building their teams?
Yeah. I think it's very easy, no matter what industry you're in, for someone to pick it apart. I think, and it's easy to say, whatever industry. It's easy to look at people that are building AI tools and say, you're going to come and take my job. And so you could probably shy away from that too. And so I think my biggest piece of advice there would be, what is the positive that you're doing? Forget the noise in the external environment. Like what are you really trying to do? And what is the benefit that has for the greater good? I mean, I know that sounds very big, but focus on the positive. And sorry, just to go back to that DIA comment, that's where I had that epiphany. I didn't really finish my story there, is that there was a gentleman, he had been in the industry for a very long time. And we were on a panel together, and he said that he called it out in the middle of that conference. He said, I know working in pharma comes with, mixed responses to what it is, the people that you're talking to. And he said, but at the end of the day, we save lives, And so that really resonated with me. And so I think I would encourage everyone to think of it that way in terms of what is the good, what's the value, that you're trying to bring and focus on that.
Yeah, so certainly, and no matter what industry we're in, we should be able to find some kind of value that will bring it forward, whether it's
Yes.
for the society as a whole, for our individual employees, or whatever it is. But focusing on and reminding people of the mission of the organization is so vital.
Yep.
So kind of expanding off of teams and kind of looking at leadership and your growth and trajectory and how you've gotten to where you are. What's the biggest lesson you think you've learned along the way?
You're going to make mistakes. I think it's, you're going to have those leadership failures. You're going to hire the wrong person into a role. You're going to think that you have made the right decision and it's going to be the wrong one. And so the answer to that is, again, for me, is to really stop, reflect, and say, what could I have done different? Could I have done it differently? Usually the answer is yes. And to try to not repeat that mistake going forward, I think is, and to just acknowledge that we always have room to grow and to develop ourselves. It's, and we're never too in tenure with our career that we shouldn't have a development plan. And so just to constantly be looking for those, and I think one of the things too, we're always looking for that big change, right? We're always looking for that big aha moment. Even when we're talking about innovation, we're talking about this. I think a lot of times people see that as this dramatic change. And often it's those little changes that come along. And so that's why you kind of saw me laugh. It's hard because it's, on a daily basis, it can be the smallest little things that can have the impact that ultimately change how your perspective on something, how you view something. It can change how you respond to something. So it's for me, I don't know that there's been these big moments. I can tell you my first time leading people, I did not do a good job at it. At least I feel like I didn't do a good job at it, and definitely shied away for a little bit. But at the same time, then later, again, when I was more ready in my career to take another look at that, it was like, what went wrong? And how can I keep that from happening the next time? And trying to really to learn from that and move forward.
That's great. Yeah, I think we all have stories of how we didn't necessarily start off as great as we might have been later on. But Rachel, so, thinking about that in terms of your team and thinking about it in terms of, you have some people at different stages of their careers, how do you pick out who's going to be a future leader?
That's a great question. I'll bring back to managing towards people's strengths, and sort of seeing, but also sometimes too, it's stepping back and seeing who you feel like has that drive to sort of, it's there, right? It's like a spark, and it's kind of hard to explain. But we do that. I mean, we have succession planning, in my role. But a lot of times too, I think we're looking at, is there someone ready today? And oftentimes the answer is no. And so I think it's, how are we preparing that next set of leaders how am I preparing someone to take my job? That's what I want. I want someone to take my job. When I hire people, I want to hire people that I think can take my job. And that's really when we talk about building strong teams, I've never had the fear of bringing in someone that is smarter than I am, or has more technology skills than I have. And that's something that I've had to also just recently learn to be okay with. I used to be the doer, right? I was in the weeds. I was the tech nerd. I was able to use all the data tools and do all the things, and was sort of known for that, and which is what wound me up in the position I am in now. But now I have others on my team who are way more advanced in the tools and the things. And I definitely had a moment of panic where it was like, oh my gosh, am I losing it? But it's not. It's to be excited for them, because as the whole industry changes, it opens up my time to do other things, kind of like AI, the things that I haven't had time to do or focus on in the past, which may be developing that next leader to take my role. It frees that time up for me to now be able to do that. And so to not be scared of that change, which is inevitable.
So such a great point, and so much growth you've shown by talking about that. If we are the best tech person or the best engineer or the best salesperson, that's what we should be doing. If we want to lead people like that, we need to know how to lead them. So we don't want to be the best at that. We want to have people under us who are the best at that, doing that as well as they can. You mentioned AI, and I did skip a question before. I just want to go back to it because I feel bad. Peter asked before, how far will AI transform the traditional business model of the pharma industry?
I have no idea, Peter. I wish I could tell you. I think that it's to be determined. I think, again, I don't want anyone to think, again, I'm one pharmaceutical company. Are we looking at AI tools and solutions? Yes. But again, it's more to supplement our work at the moment, not to change drug development, not to change the way we have functioned. I think the industry is very far, very, very, very far from that.
So to all of you watching, I have a couple more questions I'm going to ask Rachel, so you're not off the hook yet. But we will be ending in about 5 or 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, please now use the time to type them into the chat boxes, or however you're getting to us. Go ahead and do that. But back to my questions with Rachel, and this has been awesome. You've really shared quite a bit already. If the audience could remember just one thing about how to lead, how to create a high-performing team, how to lead through change, what's your message?
I'm going to go back to perspective. I literally have a sign on my door over there above my door that says perspective is everything. And I was looking at some things, not going to lie, plugged some things into Copilot, and it gave like a really good example of, if you're walking down the road and you see bricklayers, and the bricklayers you ask the first bricklayer, there's hundreds of bricks. What are you doing? It's like, I'm laying hundreds of bricks. I'm tired. It's hard work. You ask the second bricklayer, what are you doing? And he says, I'm building a cathedral. And I think one of those is, very much focused on that is totally perspective. And, one is seeing it as a task, as a burden. The other is seeing it as an opportunity and has purpose. And so for me, I think perspective is everything. And it's how we look at things, and just to continuously evaluate, what is your perspective? What is that person's perspective? And those may not be aligned. And how do we work to get to that common purpose versus looking at it as just different opinions. So,
yeah, perspective is everything, right? We can all look at things much differently from each other. We have to know what it is we're trying to achieve. That's certainly a great message to end this on. So Rachel, if there's any other questions come in, we're here for them for the next several minutes. But while we wait up, here we go. We have one from Kate. What a lovely personality you have, Rachel. You're getting compliments all over the place. You really came through on screen. Where can a working mother find the energy to meet expectations at this level?
I've got great kids. I gotta be honest. I'm tough on my kids, but they're great. So I can't even take full credit. So thank you very much.
So thank you for that, Kate. I appreciate the question as well. So Rachel, thank you so much for being with us. This was really eye-opening and just a great discussion about leadership and culture and virtual teams and global teams and everything else. I want to thank all of those folks who are here with us live, and all those questions were excellent. And thank you for those, and those who are watching this in the recorded area later on. Keep watching, and always you can send questions to Rachel on LinkedIn. Her link is in there, and my link is in there. We always love to talk about that. And I just want to kind of let people know what's coming up. So on July 14th, next Tuesday, we have Human Skills as a Competitive Advantage will be the next session in the FLIGBY in Action Live Summer Leadership Series. And this is going to be a great one as well. Rachel was awesome. Scott was awesome. This next one's going to be awesome as well. And we have one of the world's leading experts on leadership and management. A good friend of mine, Bruce Tolgan, is going to be joining us to talk leadership and management. On July 21st, we're going to explore decision-making and leadership during complex times. And we're going to be talking about those complex times with someone who certainly knows about it, with the Commissioner of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection for the state of Connecticut, Commissioner Rennell Higgins. That's going to be a really interesting one. And then we're going to close it out on July 28th, close out our 5-part FLIGBY in Action Leadership Summer Series with Dr. Christopher Berg. And he's going to discuss the future of talent management. And it's something he knows quite a bit about as he works in talent management. And I believe his dissertation was focused on that as well. So once again, thank you to today's guest, Rachel Evans. Thanks to the team at FLIGBY for putting this all together. And thanks to all of you for watching. Have a great day and keep leading.